Hi, I'm Dan Yost, and this is Just Records, and you're watching Mixdown Mondays. Hey, welcome back. It's been a while. Yeah, I would love to say I'm going to get back to making these on a weekly basis, but we'll just have to see what's in the cards for that. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to see y'all again, and let's just get right into it. We are on episode 30, and today I want to discuss the top 10 things that you can do to prepare yourself for your first time in a professional recording studio. Now, I've had all types of clients come into the studio and all types of genres, and many of them are first time clients, and they have a lot of the same questions in mind. So, I thought I'd make a little list of some of the questions that they typically ask for you to consider before you go into a professional studio to record for your very first time. And with that, let's get on with the list. Number one, consulting with your engineer or producer. This means that prior to your day one of recording, you should be discussing with your producer or engineer what's to be expected for your first session. Something like having an outline prepared for you to head into the studio. And this can be done pretty much on the phone or in person. Personally, I like to meet my clients one-on-one and break down what all parties should be expecting for their first time recording. A lot of those things are also going to be covered in this list. Number two, be prepared. I cannot stress this enough. You should be at your utmost preparedness for the first day and through the end of your recording session to be in the studio. This means that you are rehearsing your songs and that you've been practicing in the days and weeks leading up to your first time recording. It's going to pay off in the long run with your budget on money and time that you are spending in the studio. This also means considering putting on fresh guitar strings on your electrics and acoustics. Maybe not necessarily your bass, but can't hurt per se. I know that bass strings, they do like to be worn in a little bit, especially because new strings kind of feel like you're playing on a chainsaw. But consider putting on fresh drum heads. I know it's expensive, but your drums are going to sound their best when the heads are nice and clean and tuned. That way, you're all set up for the first day of recording. And remember that setup takes longer than you might expect, because when you're practicing at your space, your stuff's already there. But when you go into the studio and move in for a session, you're tearing everything down and setting it all back up. And then on top of that, we got to put microphones in place of every instrument so that we can capture what they're going to be playing. So it takes a lot longer than you might imagine, especially when tracking drums, which is typically first. Your drum setup, mic placement, gain staging, all of that takes time. That leads me to number three, having a prepared budget. Now, you are going to talk about your budget in your consultation with your engineer or producer. You're basically going to be asking them what it takes to record XYZ. While generally it's just a rule of thumb that I like to go by, I typically try to tell my clients that it's going to take about 2 to 3 hours per song to record it from start to finish. And you might be thinking, well, my song's only like 2.5, 3.5 minutes long. Why does it take 3 hours? Well, it takes a couple hours to set up the drums and then break them down. And then it takes time to set up the guitars, the bass, and we haven't even gotten to the vocals yet. So on average, it's typically for a 5-song session or a 5-song EP, and that's only if you're multi-tracking. But all in all, it's going to take about 2 to 3 hours of tracking all of those parts for those songs, each song. So 5 songs isn't 15 minutes in the studio at 3 minutes each. It's 10 hours or more. Double that, 20 hours sometimes, 30 hours, just depends on what it is you are adding to your song. So have a budget prepared, and that way you aren't shocked by how long it's taking to get the process finished. Also, having your reference tracks ready. Now, I mentioned reference tracks in a previous video where we talked about how you should be giving your engineer tracks that either inspired you or that you were listening to when you were writing, or that a sound that you want to sound like. And this also includes reference tracks of your own music, having demos of your stuff. This should be sent to your engineer prior to your session. That way they have an idea of what you're going to be sounding like and what to expect for your day of recording. Number 5, don't get wasted in your session. Nothing says that you don't take your own music seriously than being inebriated on the times that you're supposed to be working on your stuff. It's just, in fact, it's just better to avoid all substances the day of, and let's just say it the night before you go into the studio, because you want to be fresh and rested, and you just want to have a good time. But that good time doesn't mean getting loaded and wasting your time and the engineer's time. This also leads me to number 6, which is friends and family. Now, I totally understand having a best friend or a family member can be your rock or center for keeping you grounded and comfortable. And having a parental guardian is absolutely acceptable for any young adult wanting to record in a studio. This is not about that. This is about your drinking buddies or your friends of the band or extra people that are not in the band or not a guardian. They aren't really welcome in a studio session. They're a distraction for you and your engineer, and they're just going to eat up your time, and that's just going to waste money. So it goes back to time and money and productivity. Unless they're there to center you or to be your personal encouragement or a guardian, leave the studio time to you and your bandmates. Number 7, take breaks. It is important to remember that what you're doing is work, and while it's supposed to be fun, it can still wear you out. And taking breaks, getting fresh air, maybe going on a walk, these are all things that do help the process. Don't go on like a 2-hour break because that's time, but, take 5-15 minutes. It's absolutely acceptable to need to take a moment to re-center yourself. And that way you get the best performance out of yourself and you get the best take tracked. Now, unless you have a big budget, number 8 is essentially trying to avoid writing in the studio. Let's say you have an unfinished song and it just needs a couple more parts to be completed. This will take time, and unless you have the budget and the ability to just say, hey, no, we budgeted this, we can totally make up the rest of this song here in the studio. As an engineer and a studio owner, I'm totally fine with that. Take all the time you want to write your song and create new parts and add layers. I mean, by all means, if it helps the song, do it. Or if you want to write in the studio, do it. But just be prepared that it's going to really rack up your expenses. And it's just not going to be a good day when your engineer tells you you're out of studio time and you haven't even finished your project. So unless you have an extensive budget, try not to write in the studio. It's just going to eat up a lot of time. Number 9, don't be afraid to call it a day, especially if you've booked multiple days in a row where you've got drums, then guitar, then bass, then vocals. If you've hit a wall and you're not going to get any more productivity out of yourself, talk to your engineer. Make sure that they know that you're going to be coming back. They know that you're in it for the long run. If you're not feeling up to snuff, don't try to push it. You're not going to get anything better out of yourself. If a break didn't help, try calling it a day and come in the next day and knock it out of the park. And number 10, document your experience. Take pictures, shoot video. I mean, obviously, don't shoot video while you're trying to be performing, but document your experience. Have fun with it. It's all about fun. It's all about expression. It's all about being excited to be in the studio. And I'm sure that the studio wouldn't mind some free publicity. These are things that can interest your audience, that you are actively being creative. You're actively producing something. You can show them the behind the scenes and the process and some of the gear and some of the cool stuff that you did in the studio. By all means, at the end of the day, it's all about expression, having fun, and making music. Now, there are, of course, several other things that we could go over, but I just wanted to give you a good short list of 10 things to remind you or what to expect or what to think of when you're about to go into your first time into a recording studio. And don't be afraid to ask more questions. If you've got any, please write them in the comments, shoot us an email, follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. Feel free to engage with us. We're happy to answer what you have going on in your mind. I do hope that this list has been somewhat helpful, and I hope to see some of you in the studio in the future. So until next time, this has been Mixdown Mondays.